Hello, and welcome to Out of Our Shell, the podcast with your two hosts.
I'm Liv.
And I'm Amber. And we're the podcast that's going to be bringing you some amazing guests, some great topics that matter to our community, and we're going to try and have a little bit of fun along the way. And speaking of amazing guests, this week we have Taylor Jade Cummings with us. So, Liv, you invited Taylor on the pod. Why don't you tell us a little bit
I
more
did.
about our guests before we bring her on?
I think up to this point, we've interviewed some amazing people and they've kind of gone into their careers and what they do. And of course, we've had some experts on the show. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that, although Taylor is obviously has a wonderful career,
Mm-hmm.
she's a delivery driver for a parcel company. And, but I think what caught my eye for her was just her family dynamic. And it's just that dynamic that shows us what is possible, right? It may
Mm-hmm.
not be possible for everyone, but there is that possibility. And I think this is an episode that I would actually like to see maybe the spouse of a transgender person to watch, And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think I can't wait to see how this pans out.
Yeah, I think that visibility is so important, and this kind
Mhm.
of normalization of the trans family unit that
Yeah.
the three of us all share and have in common. And I think the more that we can tell these types of stories, the more we can kind of eliminate that fear factor that kind of comes with transition when you think about how do I talk to my spouse about this? How
Yeah.
do I talk to my loved ones, my children about this? And so
Hmm.
I definitely think this is going to be a great topic to explore today.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Perfect.
Well,
Well
you ready
then,
to do it?
yeah. Let's take a quick break, and then when we come
Okay.
back, we'll have Taylor Jade Cummings joining us.
All right.
Perfect. Hi, it's Amber, your favorite podcast host. And don't worry, I won't tell Liv. Since we're still having a hard time finding actual sponsors for the pod, I wanted to talk to you again about our Trans Pride Apple Watch band for the Apple Watch. Last time, I touched on the fact that $10 from each sale goes directly towards the Trevor Project, and I'm happy to announce that the Out of Our Shell community has raised $3,000 so far. All of these dollars go towards the at-risk services that the Trevor Project provides. Some of these services include their at-risk crisis counselors that are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I wanted to give those resources today for our listeners. Not only can you go online directly to the trevorproject.org, but you can also call them at 1-866-488-7386. And if you don't want to call them, or you might be in a situation where you might need privacy, you can even text them anonymously at 678-678. So if this is a project that you feel like you'd like to get behind, please go out and visit us at Etsy and find out more at outofourshell.etsy.com, and know that your dollars are going towards a good cause. Thank you so much. Let's get back to the pod.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the pod. Today we have Taylor Jade with us. Taylor Jade is a UPS driver, a has a blog, Taylor Jade Blogs, and also does an interesting thing. She does lives that are actually to a subject line, and I know I've jumped on a few. So, welcome, Taylor. You want to
Oh,
go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
yeah, my name's Taylor Jade. I'm 34 years old. I go with she, her pronouns.
Hmm.
And I am also a parent of two amazing
Hmm.
daughters. And I am also married to an amazing wife
Yeah.
who we've been together for 15 years dating. And we've been married for 8 years this May. So,
No. Yeah, we're going to go into that a little bit more in a bit because I love your whole family dynamic.
thank you.
Yeah. So, I do want to start a little bit about what you do for a living. Because I think it's
Hmm.
amazing. You put some Transition Tuesday photos of you and your, who you were before as a delivery driver and who you were after. And can you just go a little bit into that dynamic of how that like how you came out at work and how were you welcomed and all that stuff?
So I've been a delivery driver for 13 years. I've been with my company for a total of 15 years also. It's it's definitely an interesting like environment. I feel like it kind of goes against what you would expect
Mm-hmm.
from your typical delivery driver, per se.
Yeah.
Um, but so for me, it's a very, it's a male driven, very high testosterone environment
Yeah.
typically. It's not to say that there's no women, because there are plenty of women drivers and that are amazing.
Mm.
And for me though, I don't really know how many trans women there are that have come out through my company, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. But if anything, hopefully I could at least do a little bit of with trailblazing.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I think that it's a really fun thing, and it's really opened up a lot of I think eyes. The company that I work for, they have been tremendous in my transition since I
Mm.
came out. So uh, that would have been late 2022, and then eventually by the time like I did my name change in June of 2023,
Uh-huh.
I was kind of like, all right, I think pretty much the people within my center of our building, they're going to know.
Mm.
It's going to be out there. People are going to notice like, hey, my name changed, and obviously they're going to put in the dots
Yeah.
of like a little bit of stuff that has been going on, because I first started out with like just a little bit of makeup, and that was kind of my transition as well, where it's like, oh, we'll do a little bit of mascara, we'll add like we'll just slowly build into it. So then eventually I hopefully feel like it wasn't too much of a shock, but it was perceived really well. My management team, they have been incredible. I'm very thankful for them. Our company has a great transgender policy in place, and I can't complain. My coworkers that I interact with for me
Yeah.
daily are incredible. They refer to me, as Taylor. They do their best
Yeah.
to use my proper pronouns, and hey, we work with it.
Okay.
And then obviously you have the public life
Uh-huh.
side of things, which is dealing with customer interactions when you have to
Okay.
go door to door, and you don't know who's necessarily going to be behind door number one,
Mm.
and it could just make things rather interesting, especially being in an area where I would say it is a delivery area that is 50-50 in terms of like politics. So when you start to see yard signs and stuff, it does put something in the back of your head like, hey, how am I going to be perceived? It's not to say it doesn't work the other way as well,
Yeah.
but it just adds a little bit of like, okay, I need to just be more mindful of my surroundings, because not only am I the face of my company, I'm also a face for probably for most people, their first time dealing with somebody who identifies as transgender.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I know that.
And
I know that you, there was the dynamic of coming out to some of your regulars as well, and you had told me a story, and I thought it was kind of a neat story. Can you share that?
yeah, yeah, of course. So for that story, like what you're talking was when my name was getting changed, and I started to put together how can I do this professionally, but also where it's respectful to my customers. And that's also, like I said, you don't know where they're going to fall. So it kind of was like, hey, let's do like an icebreaker type of
Mm.
conversation. So with that, the way I ended up doing it, everybody knew me. I've been on the same route for 8 years.
Mm.
And with that, a lot of the people know they're up to the same routine and stuff. So I came in and I just was like, hey, this is going to be my last day. I'm not going to be your driver anymore. And they get like really concerned. And it was just a playful way to go about it, but like still remaining professional, because I knew for me the next day I was getting my name legally changed. And then I was taking the following like next few days off so I could take care of all the paperwork. And so when I did that, I just like, yeah, I'm not going to leave, but don't worry. The girl who's replacing you, she's amazing. She's incredible. She's kind of just like me. And then a lot of them put the pieces together because, as I said, I would start to do little things. And then just was like, yeah, so when they get me back next week, you're going to have Taylor now. You're not going to have that other
I
guy.
love it.
You're just going to get a better version of me.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. Kind of backing up to when you were coming out at work and talking about more of the corporation that you work for. did you have
Mhm.
kind of like a big coming out moment, or was it like where you sent off an email, or were you like, like sat everybody down and talked to them, or was it more just kind of this gradual, just kind of everybody will figure it out type of thing?
It became everybody will figure it out type of thing for
Mm,
me. It's just being able to kind of like figure out how a lot of my coworkers are and stuff. It was
mm,
just like, hey, we're going to work in this as like a need to know basis. So
mm,
who I report to, my supervisor, it was let them know like, hey, this is what's going on. I'm transgender, got this. I am transitioning. So it's like there's going to be name changes and I'm going to need help along the way.
Yeah.
And then it was our center manager, and then at that point it was like the drivers that I worked closest with, and I do have a tight little group of drivers that I interact with daily, where we will have conversations throughout the day, and a lot of them put the pieces together like kind of on their own. Eventually, one was just kind of like, "Hey, let me ask you something," and I was very nervous, but he has
Yeah.
been my number one supporter like the entire time,
Mhm.
and it's been great. And then it's going to trickle out, and that's pretty much what it has done.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
and now everybody knows. I would assume everybody knows, and if not, they just know me as Taylor. So
Yeah. Yeah.
cool.
That's
Very
wonderful.
cool.
Yeah, so all right, well that's coming out at work. So I do kind of want to transition now into your family life, which I think is absolutely beautiful. I love your family dynamic, and I think you know that. I've said it many times to you. So I do want to kind of go, and we're going to start more like even before that, and when you started realizing that you were a transgender woman, and can you kind of give us that moment where the light went off in your head? Um, and you're like, yes.
yes, yeah. So for some of that, like if do you want to talk more like about the childhood aspect of things
Yeah,
and just kind of like
let's go ahead and go all the way back to childhood. Yeah.
okay,
I
because
think there's a certain point where I like to say like during elementary school, early elementary school, where you start realizing maybe things are a little bit different. With
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, there's like a build up that kind of goes on with it,
yeah,
and you don't necessarily know what it is exactly, but
mhm,
you sit there and you're like, what's going on in here? I something feels different.
Mm,
yeah,
So yeah, for me, I could be cliche and be like, yeah, when I was 6, 7 years old, I remember wearing a Tinkerbell costume and absolutely loving it, and just absolute loving this. But then something was just, hey, you can't wear that.
yeah,
It's frowned upon. Don't do this. And then I could jump ahead to late elementary school, so that's what, like fifth grade
mhm.
ish. I don't know my ages for anymore. I just know eight
Yeah, I
the
think fifth is
grade
like,
school.
yeah, fifth is a good.
Yeah, so there was a time, like I remember painting my fingernails, thinking like, "Hey, I'm
Mhm,
going to go in the bathroom. I'm going to paint my nails. Mom will never know. I'll just take it
yeah,
off." Not realizing, at that age, like the aroma that nail polish gives off, and never forget my mom banging on the door, being like, "What are you doing in there?" And it's like nothing. Like,
yeah,
so it's like there's those little tiny moments where it's like
hmm,
the explorative type of moments,
yeah, yeah,
and then the more awkward story for me that I remember discussing with my therapist, and that was more like something seems off like now, was getting involved with baseball. And the one thing I do remember in that time was I don't remember like when you go from like pitching the ball or whatever,
uh,
and I do remember like there's like what like you have to have like the cup and like the jock strap type of thing. I just remember there was a point in my life like putting it on like at bedtime and like thinking like, hey, this is tight, this is flat. I like, hey,
mm,
can I please wake up like
mm,
this type of thing?
mm,
So that was like a thing I've discussed with my therapist, where I think I had like my first like gendered like dysphoric moment, where it was
mm,
just kind of like I don't like what's going on
hmm,
down there.
yeah,
And so that was just like a moment, and that's probably what I'm guessing, like 13ish or so,
okay,
11, 13.
yeah,
um, yeah, and then I get into high school, and that's probably where I started to really explore and stuff, like with like who I M, and that would, involve, going to school, like wearing bras underneath my clothes and stuff.
Oh, wow.
Failing gym class because, I didn't want to change. It was easy to play it off as other reasons, like why I didn't like pass my gym class. But, I was very like, I didn't want to be in the locker room. So it
Yeah.
was like, there were moments that I had growing up. And, that eventually gets to me, you know, 17, 18.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, I'm starting to cross dress. We're thinking like, hey, this is fun. Like, this looks like seeing myself in the mirror, being like, I don't know who she is, but like, I love
Yeah.
her.
Yeah.
And it's like, go to bed. It's like, got to take that stuff off. Like, you can't like keep it going. And at the time, my family wasn't supportive really with it. They didn't understand, I guess, is kind of probably the more
Mm.
key thing. I didn't understand it. I just thought, hey, I just must be like a cross dress. This must be a fetish thing, like whatever it is. Like
Yeah.
I didn't know the proper words for it, and that gets me to like 18, 19, right before I meet Ashley, and I'm starting to do it more. Going out with like my cousins and stuff to it was a gay nightclub and
Mm.
stuff, and going fully like female there, but like thinking like, oh, maybe it's just like a drag queen. But it's like, no, I'm not that.
Yeah.
Like, it just like things didn't feel right with that type of stuff. So it's kind of like what the childhood
Mm-hmm.
was kind of like for me, at least, or
Yeah.
those early adolescent years.
Yeah. So now you're meeting Ashley, and what does that look like?
Yeah, so I meet Ashley a little bit after I think I just turned 19. I meet her up at the college she went to. I was going to visit my best friend from elementary school and go up to visit, and Ashley's there, and it's kind of like, hey, what's going on? And there's just this instant connection. I didn't go. I was going to community college. I didn't go to the school she was at,
Mm.
but there's just something like, hey, we're going to come up here every single weekend, and it was never. We were nonstop from that point.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
just kept seeing and figuring, and we're like, hey, like you're from she lived over in New Jersey. I was Pennsylvania. It's
Mm-hmm.
like it's not a far commute. It's only an hour 15.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, hey, let's figure this out. Like come summertime, because she was getting close to the end of the spring semester,
Mm-hmm.
so she was going to be going home, and we figured out how to make it work.
Yeah.
And now, unfortunately, though, it was like near her senior year of high school. She ended up seeing a picture of me in like basically a bra and underwear, and it's just this kind of like, what the hell is this? Like I got in a way I got outed, but it was for all the right reasons and
Mm.
stuff. Like it just like brought things to the surface. It's not to say at all that she knew what that meant.
Yeah.
It's not to say I knew exactly what that meant. I just knew there was like I just I liked looking and feeling this way, but like it was just an awkward moment that like I sit there and I'm like, hey, that was definitely like a little bit of like a red flag in our relationship. But we talked about it, we communicated, and we got over that. And it was just kind of like, it's nothing.
Yeah.
And basically at that point, it was like, I am so committed to her. I'm going to do whatever it takes to uh, suppress, or what's the term, purge, like any of those thoughts or feeling. I'm just going to try and I'm going to bury it.
Yeah.
And so that's 2012.
Okay.
And at that point, we just were like, hey, let's do life. And, we were committed to each other.
Uh-huh.
And we just put things on the back burner. I put things on the back burner. I didn't think, because I wanted to make things work with her.
Yeah.
Now,
And, we get, yes.
oh, I just wanted to jump in just real quick. So that's a long decade then, from like 2012 to when you actually start
Mm-hmm.
taking like very active like steps towards transitioning. Um, what
Yeah.
was that decade like? Were there moments where you started to kind of dip your toes back in that pool, or was it just like, nope, I'm done with this. I have this level of self-control and I'm going to just like this is where my focus is.
Mm.
Yeah. So we get married in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And well, I proposed 2014. We wait 2 years to get married. You know, wanted to have the best wedding. Like we wanted to have our dream wedding, and
Yeah.
so like we wait 2 years. You know, we then get married, and it was 2016 when we're married, and it would have been 2017, maybe 18. The child stuff starts to happen. You know, let's talk about having kids,
Mm.
and I think that's very hard, and not many people who are in my immediate inner circle are aware of it. But what ended up happening was through, you know, and talking with my therapist, I think I finally have owned up to like being like, hey, this is what happened. And this was definitely like one of those like more like eureka moments I was having then, but like I still didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
But as we started to have kids, I started to take Ashley's birth control. Like
Oh.
there was just something in my head that was like, hey, I've got this going on. Like, I'm not going to, you know, show clothing. Like, I'm not going to do that. But maybe I'll feel just a little bit better about myself. Maybe if I do this. And one of somebody who was in my support group just joked with me when, you know, we discussed this, like, because that's the most like cis male thing to do is take some. It's like, yeah, it was probably not a great idea. And I mean, I don't recommend the DIY
Yeah.
approach. I recommend, you know, talking with professionals, but that was a struggle I dealt with.
Yeah.
And that led to a very big depression in my life.
Mm.
Because after that, it took us 2 years to finally conceive and then have our child, our first one. And that really took an emotional toll on me during that time because I then started to freak out internally thinking, because you read about like what, you know, like hormones do to like
Mm.
your the functioning down there.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it just was like, oh, did I just like sterilize myself? Like, am I not, are we not going to be able to have kids? And I would then start to see Ashley getting upset, not being able to have kids and just feeling so terrible and like about myself and what I did. And that
Was
was just one of
Ashley
those,
was Ashley aware of that you were
no, at that
taking
time,
those?
no, she wasn't.
Mm.
Got it.
It wouldn't have been until I came out that I just was, and through my therapy, she was just like, hey, just put it all out there and just
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
be honest with her.
Yeah.
And that's a key with, for me, we could get into a little later.
Yeah.
In terms of my relationship with my wife, honesty and communication are a key like
Mm-hmm.
component to it.
Yeah.
So I suppressed that. I didn't tell her, and it built up. And then eventually, you know, we did have our child, and it just
Mm.
was a great feeling because it was like, okay, I didn't do something bad, but
Yeah.
there's definitely a lot of paranoia I dealt with internally, and
Yeah.
put me in like slight depression of
Mm.
like, what do I do? Like,
Yeah. So
because I knew
you,
how much having children meant to her.
yeah. So you finally do have that moment, and I think it's between your two kids, right? Where you do finally tell her.
Yeah, so me and Ashley, there's a lot of, I would say, external conflicts going on that where I was sitting there, you know, watching how that was affecting Ashley.
Mm.
And it was one night after, you know, we had our child, and this would have been late summer 2021. I'm rocking Zoe, and just I looked at her and I just remember, you know, holding her, trying to get her back to sleep and everything, and thinking like, hey, I don't want this life for you, what your mom's going through. And and I've always made like, I'm going to do whatever I can for them. And it was just like,
Yeah.
I can't keep hiding this. Like, there's still like, I wasn't at 100% yet, like
Yeah.
for me being me. And I just was like, they deserve to have me 110%.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And it was at that time I just was like, hey, you know, I'm gonna, I don't know what this is gonna look like for the future for like me and your mom. I don't, but for you, for me, I need to be the best me that I can for you. So I'm gonna just say, hey, this is what's going on, and then kind of went back to our bedroom and like a little teary eyed and stuff, like being worried about what was about to happen. And it was just one random night laying in bed having a discussion, and just was like, hey, um, I, I'm transgender, I believe, type of conversation.
Mm.
And it was just a lot of like awkwardness, quietness, and it was me being afraid of opening Pandora's box and not knowing what was going to be in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously that then starts a whole bunch of conversations of like, well, what does this mean, like
Mm.
for us, for our family, like what's going to happen? And it was just like, kind of like, hey, like let's talk about it. I need to answer your questions because every single question my wife was about to ask me that night was completely valid, and she, as for my best, to best of my ability, I needed to be able to provide her with as an honest answer as I can to fill her in as to like what this maybe looks like, which then, for me included like, well, no, I'm still attracted to you. That doesn't change things. It doesn't mean this, it doesn't mean that. And it's like, it's how I feel inside. Like you're still going to always get me. It's just, I'm thinking it's going to give you a better version of me.
Mm.
Mm,
Yeah. Yeah.
mm.
So
Yeah.
that's how that unfolded.
Yeah.
Got it. Now,
So,
early, just real quick, a clarifying question here.
yeah.
So many times leading up to this moment, you kind of talked about like you didn't really know what was going on or what the motivation was. You knew you were a little bit different, and you were saying you didn't really have the words for it or the vocabulary for transgender. But
Mm-hmm.
yet here you are, yet saying like, I think I'm transgender or I want to move forward with this. Where did you start to, I guess, like discover that vocabulary, learn more about yourself, learn more about others that might be like you?
I think it was just a whole lot of like eventually starting to see it popping up more.
Mm,
I don't know if the correct term is visibility, but
Yeah.
starting to see it more,
mm-hmm,
and it just kind of was like, hey, this I think this is me based off of what has occurred in my past and stuff. It's like those feelings, those thoughts, those emotions, like they
Mm.
like it wasn't a phase. It
mm-hmm.
was there, and it never went away.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just eventually, I think the dots connected.
Got it. Cool.
And so now you've told her. Um,
Mm-hmm.
what does the dynamic look like moving forward in regards to um, your family dynamic?
So it was pretty much like, hey, this doesn't have to mean everything changes.
Mhm.
It's not the end.
Yeah.
And so for that, it was kind of like, all right, like, hey, I'm gonna start talking with like a therapist. I'm gonna go through all these different things so I could figure out like what exactly does this mean for me.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like I'm gonna start to explore just a little bit where it was like, hey, like I'll start to dabble into makeup a little bit.
Mhm.
Started adding that into like my, I guess my like aesthetic for the time,
Yeah.
and it was like, all right, maybe like we could do like the non-binary like thing, but that was like a very quick like this isn't me.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it just I already knew based off previous things like that's not me,
Yeah.
and it was just like it was one of those weird things
Yeah.
for me. Um, but when you know, I
Uh-huh.
guess.
Yeah.
And at that point, it was just kind of like, all right, so what do we do now? And for her, it was a key thing. Like we wanted to continue our we wanted to have another child. Like we still wanted to grow our family, and it was like, all right, so what does this mean then? And really, for what that meant was compromising, I guess would be the
Mhm.
term there is we said like, hey, like we're gonna do what we wanted, we're gonna build up, but then
Mhm.
once we know like we have like our child, then maybe we will start to consider going like the medical route of a transition.
Yeah.
So at that point, like my like physical, I guess, like from like how I would present myself my transition started then, but it wouldn't be until a little while that the social transition occurred, the medical transition
Yeah.
occurs,
Yeah.
Now,
and yeah.
now Liv had kind of shared this with me, this part of the
Mhm.
story, and she shared this with me because we have similar journeys in that I my wife and I also were trying to have another child after our youngest and
Mhm.
everything. And it was after I had my realization, after I came out to her, like, I am transgender. This is probably the direction that, like, I'm going with my life and everything. And then you have
Hmm.
this kind of, like, I guess, period where, at least for me, I was desiring to start moving forward with that change, but you can't hormonally, really, if you're going to try in earnest to have another child. It was very
Hmm.
torturous for me, if I'm going to be honest, knowing that it was within my grasp, but yet I couldn't because we wanted to expand our family. How was that for you, kind of in this kind of holding pattern for yourself hormonally, medically, while you were also trying to accomplish this other life goal?
Yeah. So for with us, it was kind of part of that conversation was okay. So it took us 2 years to conceive our first child. Is it going to take us 2 years to conceive our next child? But one of the things that was so important to me, though, was my family. I grew up with parents who were separated, and so they were divorced. And I had already made a promise originally, like I don't want that lifestyle for my children. And it was like I will do whatever it takes, so they'd never have to live that life I had to live.
Yeah.
And so with that, I basically said to Ashley at the time, I just was like, look, if it means having to wait 2 years for this, we'll figure out what happens after 2 years.
Mm.
But I'm willing to wait so we can make sure our relationship continues the way it has continued. And it was just the selflessness, I guess, would be maybe the word. Just her, and I always put my family, I would say, before me with things. And so it was just kind of like, hey, I'm willing to put this on the back burner as much as I can. But that did also mean though, like I did start not laser hair removal before
Mm-hmm.
like the HRT and stuff. And so by the time I did start eventually HRT, it was like we did have the ball rolling in some areas. It just, and then we find out it was only like 2 months of waiting for a baby. And then it was kind of like, oh crap, what does this mean now? Because it was like, all right, I really hope after all our serious discussions and stuff, I hope we're going to be good. Like, and I feel like a lot of people after I came out and stuff to family and friends and stuff, I just was hoping, they would understand, like, no, Ashley knew about this. We talked about this. We
Yeah.
planned for this. And it's not like we're just like, surprise. It
Yeah.
was, no, everything has had been a plan our entire relationship,
Yeah.
Got it.
except
Yeah.
being coming out as transgender. I just didn't have that on my bingo card.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned about coming out to the family members, and can you go a little bit more in depth about that, like your parents, her parents?
Yeah. Well, so my parents, like I said, going back a couple years ago, well, a couple years, 15, 20-ish years ago at this
Mhm.
point, 2008 or whatever, um, the where my family was at for me, my immediate family, this support that I have now would not have been there.
Yeah.
And the words weren't there. The support wasn't there. I don't know what a transition would have looked like for me. Would I have been, I'm one of the lucky few, I guess, where it's like I'm blessed to still have my family and stuff, but like I maybe would have been looking for like a chosen type of family.
Yeah.
And it definitely though has opened my eyes though when I transition, later in life, because a lot of my approach put their considerations into it. And while it's true you do lose a lot of people, it doesn't mean you have to lose everybody. It doesn't mean you will lose people either.
No. Yeah.
It just you're going through a transition, they're going through a transition. And for me and my journey, that just meant like, hey, hop on the Taylor train because we're going on a journey.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was I lost a few like people that just kind of limit their how much they talk to me and stuff.
Mm.
But I have been very fortunate to hold on to everybody. While through like Ashley's family, her mom and stuff, she's probably my number one supporter, and I
Mm.
absolutely love her. Do we get my pronouns wrong every day? We do. But the fact that, when it came to us looking for dresses for the gala and stuff, her mom was like, here, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? So it was incredible. Like
Mm.
to have all that support all throughout. And I don't know, maybe they looked at the way I put Ashley's considerations and feelings, and then
Yeah.
like maybe they looked at that, and that has also helped things.
Yeah.
But it could also be where we're at in society now. It's more understood. There's more of an understanding.
Yeah.
So it overall it's been going pretty well with
Yeah.
how it's been with my family. I wasn't able to necessarily talk to all my family. I have a pretty large family. And so like I would send out a text. There was one that was like, I don't agree with it's like there's nothing I agree with.
No.
It's
Yeah.
just
Uh-huh.
this is who I am and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so Ashley, her family is her mom's side at least is from Czech Republic or
Mm.
Czechia, I think is how it's written on a map nowadays.
Okay.
So I had a big like I don't know what is it like they're like 2,000 miles away and everything,
Okay.
and when we had last seen them, they didn't speak English well, and you know they have learned it, but then I care so much for her family, and it was kind of like how am I going to be able to tell them about this like and have them understand what this means and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And this would have been 2022, just a few I had just started to tell the immediate family, Ashley's mom and stuff, and it was before I would send out my little post on Facebook being like, hey world, welcome to my life. We ended up getting a message. Well, Ashley got it sent to her on her phone, and it was from who are my youngest, Daisy. She's her middle name comes from her Ashley's cousin in Czech Republic, and the thing was she she's learned English very well, and I'm everything she's doing for I'm going to get her age wrong and I'm going to feel terrible, but for being 15ish at the time, maybe I got a sweet little voice memo thing from her,
Mm-hmm.
just saying, "Hey, this message is for me." It was my dead name and stuff, and it was just like, "Hey, I just want you to know when we were here in America, you tried hard to understand my language. You did this, and just being like, hey, I I love you for who you are, and what you're going to get from this is an internal like happiness, and it's like, hey, like I'm here and I support you and I love you." And it just was kind of like, being so worried about a family who maybe like we were going to have a language barrier is how to discuss this. I didn't have to worry about telling it. It happened naturally.
Yeah.
It came out, very easy. Her mom told them about what was going on, and it was just like to get that support, from 2,000 miles away over Eastern Europe, basically.
Yeah.
It was incredible to get that type of message.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love this younger generation too. They're
Yeah.
so affirming with, our decisions, as the older
Mm-hmm.
generation to move forward. And it's like, it's just kind of a no-brainer for this younger generation. I have,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
a 16-year-old daughter and everything. And it's just kind of one of those things where it's just like, this is, of course, yes, please be yourself. And so
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's so wonderful. I'm so glad to hear it went that way.
Yeah.
yeah. So overall, like I said, just because you hear the stories about like
Mm-hmm.
losing people and stuff, it doesn't mean you're going to lose people.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean I don't know both of your stories like too much in depth and stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
like it doesn't have to. It's not always that bad. Which
Yeah.
for me and like with my family and stuff, obviously starting to post on like my Instagram and just sharing my family, it's because I
Mm-hmm.
saw a lot of the negative side.
Yeah.
And when it came to coming out and stuff, it took an emotional toll on me. Like you would
Mm-hmm.
start to see, people with their spouses, and it's like, okay, and then it's like, now they're divorced and stuff. Or like you would
Mm-hmm.
read things, and it was just
Yeah,
kind of
of
like,
course.
it was always the negative. And
Yeah.
I just like, hey, I'm here to show the positive side of
Yeah,
it.
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. I think
And
that um, the positive side is something that you definitely have, and I think it's important to put visibility on it. And I do want to go back to your family
mm,
in regards to your two daughters, because you are a girl dad, and I believe
yes.
we talked about this, and that is how you refer yourself as. And
Hmm.
so, but I see the pictures you post, and they're just so beautiful, and particularly the one with you and your daughter cooking. I think you guys were making pancakes or cookies, is what it looked like.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was such a. It just, I don't know. Kind of, I got kind of emotional just even looking at it, because it really just shows that it is possible to have a family dynamic and to also be
Mhm.
a girl dad or a mom, depending on, how you title yourself. But can you just go a little bit into your relationship with your daughters and what that looks like, just maybe on a weekend day or something?
Yeah, I mean, so for us, I obviously have a hectic work schedule, and it's not it's not always easy to be there and stuff. But
Mhm.
you know, we make it work and stuff when it
Yeah.
comes to that. And then the weekends are kind of like our time to just do our things and stuff.
Hmm.
And we were just having this conversation last night with another couple who's they're it's a trans woman and then their wife, and they also have a child and stuff. And we're just having these conversations about like it's like what's life kind of like for you, and like how's this going and stuff. And for me, I've always been considerate on how much like Ashley she loves being a mom and like what that
Yeah.
means for her. And it's like we've had that conversation, and it really for me was just a respect I have for Ashley, where it was like I'm never going to take that title from you.
Hmm.
I don't think I could ever do like mama, like any of those things. And the one thing that I got from our conversation with the couple who we were talking to, they were just had mentioned about like where they were at when they like had come out to their children and stuff, and they were at a very young age where it's like they didn't fully process it. But my daughter, who sees me, my oldest at least,
Hmm.
like she just already knew dad and the basic pronouns, and we work on that stuff. My daughter, she gets it wrong. She's 50-50. It's like some days she's spot on with it, and then but I'm like, hey, you're 4 years old, like, so there's no pressure.
Yeah.
And basically for that, it just turned into like, eventually if like a term ever wants to come out for her, um, that's up to them for me. And that's how I've always have handled it. I'm like, I'm never going to make them, especially for them. I'm like, I'm never going to make them change.
Yeah.
Eventually I would love to, be considered like wife and stuff. But I told Ashley, I'm like, hey, like when we renew vows or something, maybe we'll eventually, become officially wife or whatever.
Yeah.
Cause it's like, you're still married to that other guy and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like it will be great when you're married to Taylor again, and just pick it up from there. And we obviously we if people get the stuff right or wrong, we roll with it because at the end of the day for us it's just semantics. So it's like
Hmm.
if you call me a dad, it's like okay. Yeah, that's what I go by. If you call me, it's like, hey, thank you, I love it. It means a lot to me, but it's like, hey, I don't go by that. It's like, but I don't ever call people out. I let it roll. But
Yeah.
it just
Yeah.
came down to figuring it out with my kids and stuff, where it's like that's going to be up to them. We love it, and I can still do dad things with them. I can do mom things with them. It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
you know they'll be the ones when they get to that age, because they weren't 1 o'clock where it became just 1 o'clock 1 years old when it would have been probably a lot easier to adjust, or she was a little bit older to have these conversations with, be
Hmm.
like, hey though, this is what's going on, like how do you feel and stuff, and just it takes her feelings into consideration.
Yeah. I love that.
and and that even comes to, so I'm doing voice training and
Uh-huh.
I'm still learning it very much. But my daughter, one day, when we play Barbies, she's like, you could talk like this, like bring it up and everything. But she does tell me, like, she's like, can you talk normal? And it's like, of
Mhm.
course, girl, I respect that. And
Yeah.
it's just, that's a key thing, is just, hey, I respect how they're feeling. And it's like, hey, we'll work our way into it. She eventually starts to hear me talking more higher and higher as it goes and stuff, and I get more comfortable doing it.
Hmm.
But that's just kind of what life is like for us,
Yeah.
in terms
Yeah.
of transitioning. But it's
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Um,
hey, I sit there, I'm like, I'm going to own it.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and I'm proud of it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's beautiful. So we are going to switch gears here into what you do for the community. But before I do, Amber, do you have a question that you would like to ask before we switch?
Oh no, no, I'm good. I'm
Looked like you
absolutely
were
good.
going to jump in.
Just
Okay.
enjoying the interview.
Yeah, yeah. So I do want to go into the LGBT equality alliance that you are a part of. Um, let's chat about that for a sec.
Yeah. Yeah, that's been When I sit there and I look at that bingo card, I'm like, that wasn't on my bingo card,
No,
but
yeah.
hey, we're putting it on there.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, so I had in late November, I kind of was coming out of a little slump, and I just was like, hey, I would love to be more involved with things.
Mm-hmm.
And I just didn't know what that would look like anymore. I was like, I still wanted to have community involvement. And so I saw the Equality Alliance, and through my mom, she had a mutual friend that was one of the board members already.
Uh-huh.
Reach out to him, and I was like, hey, can you tell me a little bit about this? And they mentioned how they have like a gala coming up. And I was like, cool, like, how can I help type of thing. And at that point, I hopped right in, and I just was like, hey, what can we do to assist with this? And that's where I was able to, surprisingly, with my job and stuff, I was able to go through a lot of the businesses that I knew were extremely friendly to the community and stuff like that. And we have at the gala, they have a silent auction. It was just like, hey, would you like to donate? And I basically went like right down the line of them, and I sat there and I'm like, I got like everybody. I was like, this is cool. And it was one of those moments like that felt nice. And then eventually I saw they had a post saying, hey, we're looking for a new board member or members. And I just like, you know what? I'll write my name in. And it's intimidating for me because doing a podcast, this is new to me. Doing, joining a board, that's new to me. Like doing a blog, that's new to me.
Well, you're
What
doing
did
all
that
this,
do?
but you're doing all this really, really great, though, by the way. Just FYI. Like, the blog's
Yes.
fantastic. So far, so good on the podcast. So you've got to be doing great at the nonprofit as well, too.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we're doing good. I've kind of figured out like where I could start to assist with it. But the one cool thing about all that, to throw like a little pun, it got me out of my shell type of thing.
Yeah.
Nice. Thank you
Where
for
it's
that. I
like,
appreciate that. We're going to turn that into a
so my
commercial.
Yeah.
yeah, so my transition, it really opened me up more and like allowed me to just commit myself so much more to people and to see how I could help.
Yeah.
And so with the board and stuff and the LGBT Equality Alliance of Chester County here in Pennsylvania, it's really great to see, we have Pride Fest, we have Outfest, we have a Pride Run, and I'm drawing a blank on the last one. Pride Fest, Outfest, the gala. I already talked about it. I mentioned it. So we do the
You
gala.
looked beautiful too, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we have those 4 great events in the county and stuff, but also, by being on the board and stuff, it's also to be there to advocate for others.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that scares me because here I am doing a podcast. It's like I'm advocating for, the trans community here and stuff. I'm also advocating for like, spouses, parents and stuff. Like you could still do this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's really cool to see that and just being able to do that and now doing it for the county. And it's a little intimidating to be like a voice for it. So, but it's incredible. I mean, and they offer a lot of great little meetups that they do, from like walks to book clubs. So, and then just being there. So I'm really looking forward to those, see how I could assist with it.
I love that. So on top of that, you also have a blog.
Yes.
Yeah.
TaylorJadeBlogs.com. So that's one of those things that was interesting. I am a big fan of Hamilton the musical, and if you're familiar with it at all, there's a big thing about taking your shots and your opportunities, but then it also has a line in there where it's like it's who's going to tell your story, and I decided I'm going to be the one to tell my story. And I started to put it out there, like my early transition stuff. And that's what I've been looking at as I'm starting to write this next piece. Because I'm like, I talked about how I got to here, which is something I ask myself all the time. Like, how did you end up here? Like, what exactly happened? Like, it blows my mind in a way. But I'm going to start to answer more of those, especially to be like, hey, this is how I got here. And but by telling my story and stuff, even for me, though, I didn't start it to gain popularity, clout, or whatever. It was just, hey, I'm putting it out there because as long as one person stumbles across it, and if something resonates with them, that's a win for me.
Yeah.
And if somebody who's unsure what it means for somebody to be transgender stumbles across it and goes, hey, I didn't realize that. They're just a normal family out there just living life.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, if I could change their mind or something, just that's a win. That's all I ever thought about with it.
Uh-huh.
And then otherwise for me, it was just something maybe for my daughters to eventually read and stuff or
Yeah.
see, where
Yeah.
it was there to put my story out there for me then to read so I could
Yeah.
see just how far I've come.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that on top of that, you do do interviews as well in that blog, and so I do want to just kind of throw that out there that if you're not comfortable being on a camera such as this, or being on, on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, give Taylor a hit because she would love to interview you for her blog.
Yeah.
Yeah,
When I had the chance to do that, that was one of
or you
those
can do
things.
both.
See, both that
Yeah,
works.
yeah.
Yeah, no. When I did that though, that was just me sitting there. I just was like, what can I write? I didn't know what to write about.
Uh,
And I just would see, and I'm like, hey, if somebody wants to come talk, because I could only talk so much about the obstacles I've dealt with.
yeah.
And to tell the trans experience for people, it's like there's different stories out there. And it was just
Hmm.
like, hey, if you
Yeah,
want to tell me how you overcame something, like
yeah,
I would love to try. And it was one of those things. Writing a blog, like I said, it wasn't there. Doing interviews, I didn't know what I was doing, but
yeah.
I was willing to do that. And it did well. I think I wrote it pretty well, and I think I
You did
did
a great
them
job.
justice and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Oh, no, you did
And
absolutely.
great. Yeah,
like,
yeah,
and now I mean, hey, maybe we could go for like a Taylor Jade blogs and theme it to be like out of our shell. Well, I don't know, make it out of our shell, finding happily ever after type
yeah,
of thing. Because I feel like that's what I've themed
Absolutely.
the
yeah,
interviews.
Yeah.
yeah,
If
yeah.
it makes you feel any better, we have no idea what we're doing either. So I
No,
think we're all in yeah,
no.
we're all in good company.
Yeah, yeah. I know. I definitely fit in that same category of just trying to, put myself out there a little bit more and see what I can contribute. Right. So,
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah, and then so on top of the blog, you also do lives and on Instagram. And I think your lives are a little bit different because you don't just, I mean, you do occasionally, but you have a specific topic point for your lives, and then you start
Hmm.
going into that conversation. And I think that's neat. And can you tell me how that came about? And
Yeah, so that came about. So I had my blog over on like Blogger or whatever it was, and I was just
mm,
switching it over to be on my own like personal site then.
mm,
And somehow I fell into this wonderful algorithm on Instagram, and it just kicked me into this crazy social media world that I had no idea
yeah,
existed. But it was nice for me because I struggled to find community
mm,
locally, and it was like I didn't know. And then eventually, starting to find other trans women in particular that are also, parents, spouses,
yeah,
or just, transgender. And or even like later in life, I guess,
yeah,
what
Mhm.
seems kind of be like what who I interact with the
Mhm.
most.
uh-huh,
It's been really cool. So I have no idea how that happened because when I first posted in like January, I think I was at like only 115 of my family and friends that followed me.
uh-huh,
And before I looked at just a little bit, I'm like, why am I at like 920? I don't concern myself too much with that number. I'm fascinated by it because it's like it went up so high. I'm like, I don't know what it is about like
yeah,
me or my family that like, but I'm like, I get it that like there's a positive side, and it's like I think it's just really cool to see how it's hopefully helping people, and that goes back to my blog and stuff, where it's like getting
mhm,
onto Instagram. I'm able to post a little tiny little snippet thing here and there,
yeah,
where I could say like, "Hey, this is like a small thought I'm having before I do a bigger one on my blog." But then eventually the Instagram Live came about, where it's like, "Hey, for me to learn more, I need to be able to talk more with people and actually
yeah,
understand." And I wanted to make it more structured a little bit, where we could actually talk about like some key issues and stuff and
uh-huh,
just learn from there. And then that also goes to becoming a board member for the Alliance, was how can I maybe use this as a tool to help promote, events in the area or just things that are going
uh-huh,
on. And so I was like, hey, I might as well just start with, I guess, my platform that I have going on and just see where it
yeah,
goes.
yeah,
And it's been cool, like getting people to, just pop in and be like, hey, what's up? And
yeah,
just chit chat for a little bit and just learn so much. And the messages I get, like outside of like doing that and stuff, it's just they're very uplifting and powerful. And it's just like, hey, I love what you're writing and doing and saying. And I'm like, thank you. I have no idea what I'm doing, but hey, I'm glad something,
Yeah.
because that goes to that message I said just a little bit ago.
Yeah.
If it's just one person and it's just like, okay, we're getting a little bit more than one person that it seems to be helping.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's been fun. I mean, I don't know if by the time, I don't know when this will be posted. But I do plan on having the couple that me and Ashley talked with. I think you might have seen. I've been doing them a lot with. Her name's Krista. She's also a California
Yeah.
girl,
Mm.
and we're talking about getting her wife on, and then also getting my wife on, just so we could talk about
Yeah.
the different experiences and what life was like for them while we just see where it goes, and just let them tell their story too,
Yeah.
and hopefully help and encourage other people. So
That's
I'm
great.
looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So I have no idea if it'll occur by the time this
Well,
goes
I think I
public.
think you're going to be. I think this episode is going to air late May, so mid to late May would be probably the schedule on
Yeah.
this. So yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
So you've got a little
Yeah,
bit.
Yeah.
there's a good chance we might have it figured out into our scheduling to get it where we could get all four of us
Yeah.
on a little
Cool.
thing. But it's really exciting to see just how I could help people using
Yeah.
the platforms that are out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're almost out of time. I do want to just go into one last thing, and that is both you and I have a passion for Disney. And
Yes.
so my question one is, tell us a little bit about your passion for Disney. And two, do you have any plans to come out to Anaheim, California to Disneyland Resort?
So we don't have anything set in stone yet to come out
Okay.
to Anaheim.
Okay.
We do have something set for Disney World again, which should be in September. So if you want to come, well, you know where to find me in September.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I don't know exactly what it is about Disney. I have a very big love for it. A lot of the story for our children and stuff was it took us 2 years to have them. Well, the first child, and then every time though we had been in Disney and we made a wish at Cinderella's wishing well, and I can't help but think that that was a part of having our children, because
Yeah.
it seemed after 2 weeks after being, it was like, oh, we're having a baby.
Yeah.
And it was every time we did that. So that grows a lot of that passion, which is why my arm is a very Disney tattoo. It tells the story of my children and stuff, and it's a really special place for me, Disney World. And then when it comes to their fireworks show in Disney World, it has been what has encouraged me to start writing my blogs and stuff, which is why it's Happily Ever Cummings. The Disney World show, though, is Happily Ever After. And it basically talks about, your heart has a desire, and when you're brave enough to listen and bold enough to pursue, it's going to unlock, this magic inside of you, and it's going to help you, find your happily ever after. And so I get very connected to the soundtrack and stuff, and it just has been a very big motivation for me to do what I've been doing. And I am just,
I love that.
I'm obsessed with Disney, and I am a
Yeah.
Disney.
Well,
I'm proud to admit it.
I'm going to get you out to Anaheim at some point.
I hope so.
All right.
And I'll make the
Well,
trip down too.
yes, you will.
I was gonna say, I've got some California girl connections now.
Yes, you do.
Yeah,
You
do.
absolutely
Yes.
do. All up and down the
Yeah.
coast.
hmm
So,
Well, we are just about out of time, and I really want to thank you. One last thing, go ahead and give out your info. How can people find you on Instagram?
right, so on Instagram, I believe my handle it is __ Taylor.jade,
Okay.
and that's how you can find me on Instagram. And then if you are curious to see what I'm doing with my blog, you can check out taylorjadeblogs.com.
Okay.
And then I don't know exactly the link for the LGBT Alliance for us in Chester County, but if you're local to that area, I believe it's LGBTEAchesco.com.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
And that's
you can send it
to
to me
find out.
after this podcast, and then we'll put it as a link at the end or in the description of YouTube.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us,
Yes.
Taylor. It was really great
Thank
getting to
you.
know you
No,
more.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, thank you for
Mhm.
allowing me the opportunity to try something new. And I am very grateful for the opportunity to do this. And I am very appreciative of being able to meet both of you.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely the
well,
same.
like you do
Yeah.
everything, you totally nailed the podcast as well too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah, totally. You got that.
All right. All right, everyone. We'll be right back.
Hi, it's Amber, your favorite podcast host. And don't worry, I won't tell Liv. Since we're still having a hard time finding actual sponsors for the pod, I wanted to talk to you again about our Trans Pride Apple Watch band for the Apple Watch. Last time, I touched on the fact that $10 from each sale goes directly towards the Trevor Project, and I'm happy to announce that the Out of Our Shell community has raised $3,000 so far. All of these dollars go towards the at-risk services that the Trevor Project provides. Some of these services include their at-risk crisis counselors that are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I wanted to give those resources today for our listeners. Not only can you go online directly to thetrevorproject.org, but you can also call them at 1-866-488-7386. And if you don't want to call them, or you might be in a situation where you might need privacy, you can even text them anonymously at 678-678. So if this is a project that you feel like you'd like to get behind, please go out and visit us at Etsy and find out more at outofourshell.etsy.com, and know that your dollars are going towards a good cause. Thank you so much. Let's get back to the pod.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the pod. Wow. So that was a great interview, Amber. I really like Taylor, and I have some takeaways. But first, I want to hear what you thought.
Yeah, I love all these interviews that we do. It's so great getting to
Mm-hmm.
hear and be able to broadcast these trends stories. But one of the things that I guess my biggest takeaway was here was that every trans story is different, but there's so many similar veins in
Yeah.
each of the trans stories. And while we didn't get a chance to really explore this on the pod today, one of the things that struck me was that Taylor had talked about, taking her wife's birth control to kind of self-medicate
Oh, yeah.
before, she even knew kind of really why or what was going on, or had the
Uh-huh.
vocabulary to define it. And I also had a very similar experience as well too. I was self-medicating before I even had that vocabulary for transgender.
Mm,
I didn't know why I was doing it. I just knew that I needed to, that it felt good. This
yeah.
was something that my body for some reason knew it needed. These things that we
Yeah.
do in the shadows that we don't talk about too publicly, that require
Mm,
an extreme amount of vulnerability, are still occurring on such a
yeah.
consistent basis in so many of these stories. It never like ceases to amaze me. So that's
Yeah.
my biggest takeaway is I just love it normalizes me, right? It makes me feel good. It makes
Mm-hmm.
others feel good as well too, because there is some
Yeah.
shame around some of the things that we've done, in trying to understand our own transition. And by telling these
Yeah.
stories, it can help to kind of alleviate that shame. So I think that was probably my
Yeah.
biggest takeaway from this. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah. Yeah. I think exactly the same thing in regards to similarities. I know, like, I feel like a lot of the transition journey that Taylor shared, especially in regards to coming out to everybody, was very similar to mine.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and I also what I got out of it was just the finally family dynamic of it,
Mm-hmm.
and just how my family's all grown, right? So that wasn't a thing for me, but just kind of like what you and her had in common in regards to putting HRT on hold so that
Mm-hmm.
you could start or try to start a family. And
Mm-hmm.
so I got, that's something I think maybe a lot of people will be able to relate to. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mm,
Well, I think
yeah.
we are almost out of time. Did you want to take us out?
Yeah, absolutely. That is all the time that we do have for today. So I would like to thank our
Yeah.
guest, Miss Taylor Jade Cummings, for joining us on the pod this week. I also want everybody to know that you can find us on Instagram at Out of Our Shell, grab our merch on Etsy at Out of Our Shell, and tune into the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts every week on Tuesday. And please help our little podcast grow by liking this episode, sharing it with a friend, saving it into your little library there on Instagram and YouTube and all them. We really appreciate all the support that friends like you provide in helping us grow. So, on behalf of Liv and myself, we'd like to remind you all to follow your joy because it can never lead you in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in, and we're going to talk to you next week on Out of Our Shell, the podcast. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Hey there, come out of your shell. Hey there, come out of your shell.
Don't forget to subscribe.